There is one tiny seed that researchers have quietly been studying for its effect on peripheral nerve tissue, and most people who are suffering right now have never heard of it. I want to talk about that seed, but more importantly, I want to tell you why it works. Because once you understand the real reason, everything you've been experiencing in your feet and legs is going to make a different kind of sense. Many of my patients discovered seeds like flaxseed, chia, or hemp on their own. They read something online or a friend mentioned it. They started adding them to their morning yogurt or smoothie, and to their surprise, they noticed something. A little less burning at night, a little more feeling in the toes, and they thought, is this really doing something? Here's what I can tell you after decades working with patients over 60. Yes, there is a real biological reason why certain seeds create that shift. The alpha-linolenic acid in these seeds, a plant-based omega-3, does two things that matter directly to your nerve tissue. It reduces systemic inflammation along the nerve pathways, and it supports the integrity of the myelin sheath, which is the protective coating around every nerve fiber in your body. So the relief some of my patients noticed was not placebo, it was real. But here's the part nobody explains. That seed, as powerful as it is scratching the surface of a much deeper problem. And if you stop there, the damage continues. Every night, every morning, silently. I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to explain changes everything about how you understand what's happening in your feet and legs right now. If you are over 60 and you feel that tingling in your feet when you're trying to fall asleep, that buzzing, humming sensation like your feet are plugged into something, I want you to know that you are not imagining it. If you've woken up at 2 in the morning with a burning so intense it felt like your feet were on fire, and you threw off the covers because even the weight of a sheet was unbearable, I've heard that description hundreds of times from patients sitting across from me. If you've stood up from the dinner table and your foot felt completely asleep, not just pins and needles for a few seconds, but a deep, heavy numbness that takes a full minute to come back, you know exactly the kind of fear that comes with that. You grab the wall. You think this is getting worse, because it is getting worse, and nobody has explained why. In my years working with patients over 60, I have seen this pattern over and over. A person comes in with tingling that started maybe 2 years ago, just in the toes. They mentioned it to their doctor, who said something like, that can happen as we get older, and moved on. So they moved on too. Then the tingling spread to the whole foot. Then the burning started at night. Then they lost confidence walking on uneven surfaces. They started holding the handrail on every single step. They stopped walking to the mailbox in the dark. They stopped gardening because bending down and standing up became a balance risk. And then one day their grandchild asked them to come walk through the park. And they said no, not because they didn't want to, because they were afraid. Afraid of what happens if they fall in a public place and can't get up. Afraid of embarrassing themselves. Afraid of what that fall would mean. That is not a minor inconvenience. That is a person losing their life in slow motion. And it did not have to happen that way. Think about your nerves for a moment as electrical cables, the kind that run behind the walls of your house. Those cables have a thick rubber coating around the copper wire. That coating is not decorative, it is essential. Without it, the electrical signal leaks, distorts, or shorts out entirely. The coating around your nerve fibers is called myelin, and in peripheral neuropathy, that coating is deteriorating. But here's what makes this even more serious, and I'll get to all the reasons why in a moment. The deterioration does not announce itself. It does not hurt in the way a broken bone hurts. It creates exactly the symptoms you've been living with. The tingling is a distorted signal. The burning is a misfiring nerve trying to send a message and getting static instead. The numbness is a signal that stopped arriving altogether, and the loss of balance, that is your nervous system losing its ability to tell your brain where your feet are in space. This is called proprioception, and when it goes, falls happen. Not because you're clumsy, because your nervous system has lost critical infrastructure. Now here is what I want you to understand about how this happens, because if your doctor told you this is just aging, they gave you an incomplete answer. Aging is a factor. But aging alone does not explain the severity and speed of deterioration that so many people over 60 are experiencing. There are specific, identifiable mechanisms at work, and they are largely preventable. What the research suggests increasingly is that this deterioration is being accelerated by a combination of 3 things that most people over 60 have in common. First, a severe deficiency in the specific form of vitamin B12 that nerve tissue actually needs. Not just any B12. I will come back to this because the distinction matters enormously. Second, chronic low-grade inflammation along the nerve pathways. a silent fire that most people have no idea is burning. And third, oxidative stress at the cellular level inside the nerve cells themselves, accumulated over decades, reaching a threshold where the cell can no longer repair itself adequately. These three forces working together create the environment where myelin breaks down far faster than it should. And here's the part that should make you genuinely angry. Most of these deficiencies are measurable, they are addressable, and they are almost never discussed in a standard appointment. Remember what I said about that morning seed? The omega-3 fatty acids in seeds like flaxseed do help with inflammation. The research on that is real. But what the data shows is that peripheral nerve regeneration requires a much more specific and layered nutritional environment than inflammation control alone. And this is where most people and most doctors miss the critical piece entirely. Researchers have observed for decades that the peripheral nervous system has a remarkable capacity for recovery, but only when given the very specific compounds it needs to rebuild. The problem is that after 60, the body's ability to absorb and convert those compounds drops dramatically. One of the most studied examples of this is vitamin B12 deficiency. Studies suggest that up to 40% of adults over 60 have insufficient B12 levels, and most of them have no idea. But here is the part the research makes very clear. Not all B12 is the same. The form found in most drugstore supplements, cyanocobalamin, does not penetrate nerve tissue effectively. The form that does is called methylcobalamin. It is the active methylated form. It crosses directly into nerve tissue and is directly involved in myelin synthesis and nerve fiber regeneration. Clinical evidence points to a meaningful difference in outcomes when patients receive methylcobalamin versus standard B12. And yet, the majority of people I see who say they've tried B12 have been taking the wrong form for years and wondering why nothing changed. I had a patient, I'll call him Harold, 71 years old, retired electrician from Ohio. When he came to see me, he had been living with burning feet for 3 years. He described it exactly the way most of my patients do. It feels like I'm walking on hot coals, but only at night. He had been on gabapentin for 18 months. It took the edge off, but made him so foggy during the day that he had stopped driving. He had fallen twice in his driveway. His daughter had started calling him every morning to check on him, and he told me that was the thing that bothered him most. Not the pain, but becoming the person his daughter worried about. He had tried B12 supplements from the pharmacy. He had tried fish oil. He had tried alpha lipoic acid he bought online without understanding the dose or form. Nothing had moved the needle. When we looked carefully at what he was actually taking versus what the research says nerve tissue needs in terms of specific forms, specific dosing, specific combinations, the gap was enormous. He had been trying. He just hadn't been given the right information. Within weeks of addressing the actual deficiencies, he began noticing changes, not dramatic overnight miracles, real progressive improvement. The burning became less frequent, then less intense. He told me he had slept through the night for the first time in 2 years, and he started driving again. I want to be honest with you about something. Peripheral nerve recovery is not instant. The nervous system is the most complex tissue in the body, and it moves on its own timeline. But what the research increasingly shows, and what I have seen confirmed in clinical practice, is that when the right support is in place, the peripheral nervous system begins to respond. The tingling can become less constant, the burning can quiet, the numbness can begin to recede. But none of that happens without addressing the underlying deficiency. And most people are not addressing it, because most people don't know what it actually is. This isn't just about the sensation in your feet. Think about what persistent nerve pain actually does to a life. It destroys sleep. And when sleep is destroyed, everything else follows. Your mood deteriorates, your concentration goes, your immune function declines, your cardiovascular health is affected by the chronic stress of pain. I have seen patients who started as people dealing with neuropathy and became over years people dealing with anxiety, depression, heart issues, and cognitive decline, all downstream of a problem that began as tingling in the toes and was never properly addressed. It affects your relationships. There is a particular kind of isolation that comes with chronic pain that people rarely talk about. You stop going out because you're afraid to navigate unfamiliar ground. You stop accepting invitations because you don't know if you'll be able to stand long enough. You start declining things. And each thing you decline takes a piece of your identity with it. It affects your sense of self. There are people who used to be the person in the family who fixed things, who cooked Sunday dinners, who took the grandchildren to the park, and now they move through the house carefully, close to the walls, and wonder who they are now. That loss is real, and it is not inevitable. If what I'm sharing today is new to you, and I suspect it is, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I release critical health information for people over 60 every week. Information your doctor may not have time to share in a routine appointment. Hit the subscribe button below. It costs nothing, and it could be one of the most important health decisions you make today. Let me walk you through the specific compounds that the research points to as most critical for peripheral nerve support, because this is where things get specific, and specificity matters enormously here. The first and most important is methylcobalamin, the active form of B12. As I described, this is the form that directly participates in myelin synthesis. It is not optional, it is foundational. Researchers have observed that patients with peripheral neuropathy who receive adequate methylcobalamin, not cyanocobalamin, show measurable differences in nerve conduction over time. The second compound is alpha-lipoic acid. This is a powerful antioxidant that works specifically inside nerve cells at the mitochondrial level, neutralizing the oxidative damage that accumulates over decades, and that standard antioxidants simply cannot reach. It is both water and fat soluble, which means it can penetrate both the water-based interior and the fatty myelin sheath of nerve cells. Clinical evidence on alpha-lipoic acid for peripheral nerve support has been building for decades, particularly in European medical settings, where it has been taken seriously far longer than in the United States. The third compound is acetyl L-carnitine. This is an amino acid compound that supports the energy production inside nerve cells. Think of it as fuel, specifically formulated for the cellular machinery that handles repair. Nerve cells require substantial energy to maintain and rebuild their structure, and acetyl L-carnitine provides the mitochondrial support that makes that process possible. Studies suggest it plays a meaningful role in supporting nerve fiber regeneration. The fourth is benfotiamine, the fat-soluble form of vitamin B1. Standard thiamine does not penetrate nerve tissue well. Benfotiamine does. It has been studied specifically for its role in protecting nerve tissue from glucose-related damage, which matters not only for people who are diabetic, but for the enormous number of people over 60 who have elevated blood sugar that has never been formally diagnosed as diabetes. Prediabetes causes nerve damage silently, and benfotiamine has been studied extensively in this context for decades. And fifth, magnesium, specifically in a bioavailable form. Magnesium is involved in over 300 biological processes, including the regulation of nerve signal transmission. It modulates the calcium channels in nerve cell membranes that, when dysregulated, create the hyperexcitability that produces burning and shooting pain. Deficiency in magnesium, which is extraordinarily common in adults over 60, makes nerve pain significantly worse. And yet, it is almost never measured in a standard blood panel. Now, finding each of these compounds separately, in the right forms, the right doses, and the right combinations, is genuinely difficult. It requires a level of nutritional literacy that most people don't have, and frankly shouldn't need to develop on their own. That is why I have left a link in the description to a formula that brings all of this together in the specific forms I have described. I have reviewed it carefully. It is one of the few options I feel comfortable pointing my patients toward. The link in the description below takes you directly to the natural nerve support formula I recommend to my patients. It combines everything I've covered today in the specific forms that actually reach nerve tissue. Take a look when you have a moment. I think it will make a lot of sense after what you just learned. Here is the thing I want you to understand about why your doctor may never have mentioned any of this. It is not, in most cases, a matter of bad intentions. It is a matter of how the medical system is designed. A physician seeing patients in a standard clinical setting has 7 to 10 minutes per appointment. They are trained and reimbursed for diagnosis and prescription. They are not trained and not reimbursed for nutritional counseling. The pharmaceutical options for neuropathy, gabapentin, Lyrica, certain antidepressants, are covered by insurance, well documented in prescribing guidelines, and fast to prescribe. Natural compounds require time to explain, are not covered by insurance, and sit outside the standard training of most physicians. This is not conspiracy, it is a system problem, and the result is that millions of people over 60 are suffering from something that has real, evidence-based, natural solutions, and they are never told. The research exists. The evidence is there. It just rarely makes the journey from the journal to the exam room. You are not powerless here. I want you to hear that clearly. The research on peripheral nerve recovery is genuinely hopeful. The nervous system, when given what it has been missing, has a remarkable capacity to begin responding. The peripheral nerves are not brain tissue. They are more plastic, more regenerative, more capable of change than most people are led to believe. What I have seen over decades of working with patients in their 60s, 70s, and 80s is that improvement is possible. Not for everyone, not on every timeline, but for the vast majority of people who address the underlying deficiencies properly and consistently. Something shifts, the burning quiets, the tingling becomes less constant, the sleep begins to return, and with the sleep the person begins to return. The person who used to walk to the park, who used to garden on Saturday mornings, who used to dance at family weddings without holding on to someone's arm. And the next time you consider reaching for that morning seed or whatever has been offering you temporary relief, I want you to remember what I shared today, because now you understand what's actually happening underneath. You understand why the seed touches the surface of something real, and you understand what it actually takes to address the root of it. You have information now that most people your age will never receive. Use it. If today's video opened your eyes to something important, share it with someone you care about, because there are millions of people over 60 dealing with this silently, and they don't have to. The link in the description goes directly to the natural formula I recommend. Take a look when you have a quiet moment. Subscribe for more critical health information every week, and leave a comment below. What was the most surprising thing you learned today? I read every single one.